Welcome to another podcast with two fun guys talking food plots, where we share ideas and methods to growing more attractive food plots with less work. My name is VanderVeen of Strategic Habitat, and my co-host is Brad Harper of Harper Growing Solutions, featuring the Plot Doctor lineup of liquid lime and liquid fertilizers. In this episode, Brad and I talk about what landowners can do if their food plots are a complete bust this year. We also talk about a better option for summer cover crops due to a lot of buckwheat failure. Brad explains how he's been helping landowners improve their spraying equipment for better herbicide and fertilizer applications. And we finish up with a new liquid product we're testing out this fall to see how well it works to keep deer off our food plots in the early stage of growth. So with that said, let's go right into the call with Brad. Hey Brad, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
Really good. Is your phone still blowing up here? We're in the last week of August. You still got product flying out the door?
Yeah, it's been wild. I mean, obviously I still got my farmers and stuff, but I would say right now, today especially, like yesterday wasn't too bad, but today's just been crazy that a lot of guys had failures from early August, and then now they're trying to, kind of come in, see what they can do at this point, and especially guys that were granular to start with. Especially a lot of guys that are calling John, asking them what they can do, and then John say, "Yeah, hey, call Brad." So it's been wild.
So of the guys that are calling you and saying, "Hey, I planted early August, I didn't get any rain, and I'm trying to start over. What can I plant?" Of these guys that have contacted you about that, what did most guys plant in that situation?
Most guys planted brassicas.
Sandy soil?
Yes and no. Half was sandy soil and half was buckwheat no-till method. And it's really been interesting that there's even been guys that did, they planted fall forage, like let's say 2 weeks ago, like up north, to where that's still pretty good timing for them. But they put it no-till into stuff, and they just had certain areas that just the germination was really terrible, and other areas it worked fine. So I think it's a matter of, guys really trying to get that process down as far as maybe rate per acre of seed itself. It's really hard to say. I mean, there has been a lot of areas where we haven't got much rain. I'm sure that there was some seed that burnt up. We've been super dry here for the last 2 weeks for sure. So it's definitely spotty all over the place. But yeah, it's been hit or miss, whether it's sandy soil or kind of doing the no-till method.
Yeah. Boy, for the guys that really did not have a good cover crop, whether it was a buckwheat summer crop that failed, they didn't get any height, no biomass to cover their fall seed. Man, that stuff just sat there and baked in the sun for, a couple of weeks. It was hot last couple of weeks,
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, I mean, I don't think I've seen a cloud in 3 weeks other than last night. So that don't help either.
Yeah. That was a welcome rain yesterday. Boy, it came through. There was a lot of places that just got, a gully washer. And, hopefully for some of the guys that didn't have any vegetation, hopefully they got level ground so that they didn't get a lot of erosion issues with that heavy rain last night.
I know. And that's where, you're putting clover or brassicas down to where they're 1/8 inch at the very most. It doesn't take much when you got a little bit of a grade, especially with the rain like last night.
Yeah, no kidding. So what have you been recommending to these guys that are calling up and say, "Hey, what should I do?"
I would say roughly half the guys they planted, germination was okay and or poor. And, it's like I said, half of them, they already talked to John. So it's like they kind of got their seed game plan going. The other guys had it and kind of are asking what to do. And it's like, well, obviously rye is always a good backup. But the last couple of weeks, I think it's still been early enough to where we can still make a good input of something else.
Yeah.
I had a lot of guys that went out with clover and chicory mix. A lot of guys ended up, going with like fall forage, just your rye and wheat and oats and peas, stuff like that, adding crimson. And then as far as the nutrient inputs, it's been a lot of the foliar applications, especially where maybe it came up, but it's just been kind of sitting there, and with the drought, it's just super stressed. Well, we can come in with that foliar, do an application of that, especially if we're trying to broadcast something else to thicken it up, and then spray that over top. And then there's been a lot of Plot Doctor Dry going out, especially where guys are just trying to add more seed to thicken it up, to where we're just adding that right with the seed and spreading that out, especially the last week here when we were kind of hoping that one of these days we'd get one of these rains.
Yeah. So Brad, the Plot Doctor Dry, for guys that aren't familiar with it, it's kind of like it's dry material in a jug, and it's really lightweight stuff. I mean, and so for guys unfamiliar with it, you just you put your seed in your fertilizer spreader, you take the Plot Doctor Dry, you sprinkle that in the seed and just kind of mix it up, kind of like almost like an inoculation for peas or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that, especially when we're looking at clover, chicory, brassica seeds that are really small, it works out really well, because not only will it kind of put more matter in your seed to where, trying to do the small rates of those small seeds per acre is really tough. So it helps you to, kind of add more mass in there. So you're not really walking an eighth of an acre and realizing that you spread all your clover out that you were supposed to do on the whole half acre.
Yeah.
That just helps you to kind of even that out a little bit. But yeah, you can definitely do that. And that's one of the easier methods. And there's a ton of guys that do that, and it works really well. But that's also a product that if we wanted to, we can mix in water and spray that. So depending on the guy's setup, we can go one way or the other with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, what I find is, trying to start that no-till process, trying to get on that rotation of, not tilling and whatnot. What I have found over the last couple of years is that even for virgin ground, it's a shame to kind of go in and disc or till, virgin ground. You got all that organic matter sitting right there on top, and you got sand underneath. I just really hate to go in and till that and bring up some sand, but if you got a lot of grass, you got a lot of duff, just a big mat of, old dead vegetation laying on top, boy, I can see where myself too, I've had some germination issues when I did not go in and break that soil up initially just to get the process going. I think from now on, I'm just going to make sure that when I start a new virgin plot on a no-till rotation, that just got to expose some soil just to get out of the gate. And then I think once you get that rye and annual clover established, that comes up the following spring. Now you've got some bare ground, to deal with between the rye stems, and, the rye should be a good weed suppressor along with the crimson clover. And that's when I think you can really start that no-till process successfully.
Yeah. And I had a guy up north who he went and just spread into, it was basically old pasture. It wasn't very tall, and there was a lot of vegetation down below. And I think to where there's some confusion out there, because it's like, well, that's kind of what we want when we're doing no-tills. We want that thatch there. We want that stuff for the seed, but you still have to have something to put on top of it. So even though you have that big grass mat, you might not be getting great seed to soil contact. But then on the other side, you don't have like 4 or 5 foot tall rye. You don't have buckwheat, oats, whatever that we're putting on top of it. So starting out like that, yeah, you're kind of, I guess you got two things going against you there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good qualifier. I guess if you don't have a lot of soil showing, and you do have some tall biomass that you can roll down, then you might be able to do it. But, in most cases, and like you said, in an old pasture or something like that, and someone's got a lot of grass, you're just automatically not going to have a lot of height there. And, really the way I try to convey things to landowners is that, you're always shooting for down the road, you want another tall crop to plant into. So basically that tall crop is a tool to act as a mulch to cover your seed. And, when you're going conventional tillage, you don't really have to plan ahead. You could just always hit the reset button. But when you're going no-till, there's a little bit of strategy and forethought looking ahead, say, okay, what am I going to be planting into this 3 to 6 months from now? Yep.
Exactly. And that's where running those, technically the 3 crop rotation, you're putting your rye back in, you're planting your summer crop, you're planting your fall crop and putting your summer crop back in, and then you're coming back with another application of rye on there. So you're getting 3 crops a season technically. And having something there to always put down on top of your seed is going to be, basically make or break it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook, and I've seen, some of my clients as well. They just didn't have the success with buckwheat. I've noticed that myself, and I'm starting to lean toward going toward the soil builder blend. As an example, like from John Comp, he's got that blend. It's got a lot of sorghum, oats, rye, I think peas, annual clover in there, and I've yet to have any kind of failure with that soil builder, and I've had it several times now with buckwheat. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things was that guys initially, for the very first time, planted buckwheat and realized that the deer just went in and annihilated it. They mowed it down. So that's where I was kind of, not only for the soil building aspect of it, because having multiple crops growing together is going to benefit you and benefit your soil, but by adding oats, wheat, rye, some sort of clover, peas, sunflowers, just having a bunch of crops together like John's blend, that's not only going to help your soil, and they're going to work together, but that's also going to give it to where, yeah, if the deer, we're going to hammer your buckwheat, that's fine if they go in and eat that, because you still have all those other crops growing. You're not going to end up with a complete failure.
Yep. And, just like, guys like Gabe Brown will say, multi-species is always better than going to monoculture. So, the monoculture of buckwheat, I'm just not sold on it. And I just love the diversity of that soil builder blend.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of guys to where they wanted to go the buckwheat. And I'm like, well, if we can get anything else in there, I don't care what it is, just get something else, just so we don't have a monoculture. I mean, that's only going to benefit your soil, and especially where the deer were eating it down. At the end of the day, they still have a crop that they can no-till into their fall plots with. So that's going to be huge.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious to see here in another week or so, now that we got some rain. There was a landowner up in I think it was Newaygo County, and I think he bought some his first name was Scott. He bought some liquid lime and fertilizer from you, and they just 10 days ago. So they planted. We had some rain in the forecast, and shoot, about the next day, all the rain disappeared out of the forecast. So they were kind of disappointed. So his food plots have been sitting pretty bare in this hot, dry sun for 10 days until last night. They finally got some rain, but he started out with, he had to till because he had all kinds of bracken fern, and, so they scratched the surface a little bit, and they had about a month ago, they had 4,000 pounds per acre of ag lime brought in with one of those big ag trucks,
Oh, yeah.
So over 4 acres, that's 16,000 pounds of ag lime that they had to put down. But that's not really going to help them this year. It's not really going to move that pH. So they also bought the lime from you. They put down that liquid, and then they put down the liquid fertilizer and went ahead and seeded. And that was 10 days ago. And they were pretty disappointed that the rain fizzled out last week. But now with this rain that we got going, I'm really curious to know and see how much germination they're going to have. And, I would say, Brad, that because they use liquid fertilizer, and calcium and whatnot, I bet you that they're going to be pretty surprised as to how well it did versus granular.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're right, to where kind of unfortunately been the norm this year. There might be some rain in the forecast, and guys went out and planted, and of course we don't get it. And then that seed just sits there, and everybody's really nervous about it. And then we finally get a rain 7, 10, even 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks, like on my screen trial that you were there for last year. And it just kind of sitting there waiting, and then it goes. And I think that's really where the salt in the granular fertilizer is going to really hurt you, just because that's going to help dry it out even more so, and help bake those seeds. So where guys are doing the liquid, especially in a scenario like that, I'd love to see some pictures of that and kind of see what happened with it.
Yeah. I know he was pretty nervous, but anyway, I'll definitely share some pictures with you if he sends me any. So, speaking of the, liquid versus the granular, I got a lot of guys out there, they got brassicas popping out of the ground already, because they planted, I don't know, 3-4 weeks, whatever. And if they were fortunate to get rain, they probably got brassicas out there. So when are you telling guys to go ahead and hit their brassicas with your foliar liquid nitrogen product? Is it height wise, or is it out of the ground for X amount of days? What do you go by?
I think overall it kind of depends per person, because some guys are 4 hours from their property, and some guys it's in their backyard. So kind of generally speaking, I'll say as long as it's roughly 2 weeks after planting all the way till 6 weeks after planting, if we can hit it somewhere within that window, that's going to be the best bet. And that's where, like, normally speaking, they're going to go and put urea out there, let's say 3 or 4 weeks afterwards. And I've seen a lot of pictures on Facebook of guys put urea out, didn't get the rain, and now all their plants are burned up.
Yeah.
So that's where they don't necessarily need that urea. That might help in one way or another, but that's what too, a lot of the times I'll have guys say, hey, before you sure, and then let's talk about it, because we can look to see how that plant's growing, look to see if there's any deficiencies there, and then we can make a whole lot better determination on what actually needs to go on. Sometimes it might be nitrogen, sometimes it might be phosphorus or potassium. A lot of the times you'll have those brassica leaves turning purplish just because it is a higher demand crop, and in that case, then the foliar is going to be phenomenal. But yeah, if we can hit roughly that, I say 2 to 6 weeks, just to give guys a big window, depending on their situation. As long as we hit it somewhere in there, that's going to be the best. But I like to make sure that we can still have some exposed soil. That way we're going to get in through the leaf and the product's going to work that way. But we can still get that product on the soil, so we can go in through the root system once we get a rain, and we're still having that carbon in the soil to help continually build that, and get that working for you. So that's somewhere in that window is going to be the sweet spot, just to try to hit not only some bare soil, but going through the leaves as well.
Yeah. So did you do any other side-by-side tests this year?
So you're going to be pretty disappointed. I was going to plant about 12 and a half acres, and I was too busy doing everything else. I got about 1.25 acres in at the most.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I have one spot that I'm going to do a side-by-side on. I haven't even had a chance yet, so it's going to basically be with rye, but at least you'll still be able to see the difference. Other than that, I don't have anything right now, but we will be doing some playing with a deer repellent.
So your deer repellent, when do you recommend putting that on it? Is it got to be out of the ground a certain height, or like when the deer start to really hit the plot?
So yeah, we got a lot of trials going out with that right now, just trying to play with that and figure out those exact times. And right now we know it has to be on the foliage. So we're kind of looking somewhere in that 2 to 3 to 4 week period. Obviously that's going to depend on deer densities and the size of the plot and what you're planting. But for a brassica plot on a smaller area, that's something, if we can get on there when it's 1 inch or 2 tall, and at least get that out there to hopefully just give them brassicas a week or two to get growing and get caught up. So that way it's not going to be a complete failure. That's where we're looking at right now. And so far we've seen some really good results, but we're definitely running a lot of trials this fall to kind of see not only how we can do the longevity of it, but exactly when that best timing is going to be at.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really excited about using that. I've got a client property. He's got, a pretty good sized food plot, and I've got one of my Browning trail cams overlooking that thing, and it's in video mode. So I'm going to split that plot right down the middle. Probably the right side, I'm going to spray it, and then the left side, I'm not. And it's going to be real interesting on video to see how those deer react after I spray that food plot with that repellent. That's going to be very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited to see what we can do with it. I think it's going to help a lot of guys out, especially when you look at the cost of doing that compared to putting up a fence. Just hoping that it does what I want it to do and really play with it a little bit.
Yep. You got any other new products coming out down the road, or you guys asking for different things as far as the liquid goes?
Yeah, not really right now. I think everything's been going really well. It's definitely more of a question about planting processes. There's been a lot of new guys and really trying to just get that first good crop under their belt. And I think that comes down to if they're tilling or not, you still got to worry about, seed depth on the tillage side and call to packing or rolling or whatever they're doing. And then obviously on the no-till side, exactly what we've been talking about. So that's kind of been more of the questions I have been getting compared to, whether or not the liquid's working or how good it's working. It's just been more of a, hey, this is what I did and this is what I got. What can I do at this point? But yeah, that's just something we're playing with, the deer repellent, and see if we're going to bring that to market or not. Like I said, I just want to make sure it's going to do what I want it to do.
Yeah.
And that's about it for right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to let you know, I don't know if I told you that when I was up north in the Gaylord area, I planted about 6 acres of food plots last weekend. I had somebody come in and crimp the soil builder because it was about 6 feet tall, and then drill behind it. And then after they were done, I came in and, sprayed the plots with fertilizer and, lime and calcium and all that stuff with your products. And I rented a Skag Turf Storm. And that's one of those machines that a lot of lawn services use. It's one of them stamped up machines, and you got 2 big tanks on the right and left. And then you got the big spray bar out front. And then you got the big fertilizer hopper for seed and dry fertilizer up front as well. But I didn't use that part. I just used the big tanks on the side, and they hold 30 gallons apiece. So I'm running around with 60 gallons of product. And man, that thing is a zero turn, Wow.
That's awesome.
I was totally impressed. I mean, I've got a 25 gallon, a tow behind, but man, some of these plots were so far apart, and, the drive back to the water supply was so far that, being able to roll out with 60 gallons, and man, it just made a huge difference. And being a zero turn, it didn't take long at all. I just love that little Skag Turf Storm. It was a pretty fun piece of machinery to ride around on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's something that a lot of guys, I think, could really benefit from, especially if they don't have a sprayer to start with. That thinking about the cost of renting that compared to buying your own and everything else, that might be something for guys to look at, especially when you're able to hold that much water.
Yeah, I think the cost on that thing was somewhere around $100 for a couple of days. And I think for a whole week, it was, I don't know, $250 or something like that. Yeah, very reasonable, and was able to get a lot done. So anyway, anything else new on the horizon, Brad? I mean, you got pushing plants out the door like miscanthus and anything like that?
Yeah, there's been a bunch of guys coming to get miscanthus in pots and fruit trees in pots. So those are going in the ground, basically starting last week roughly. And that's anytime from now until really middle of October, end of October. It doesn't really matter, but now is a great time to be getting those in. And a lot of guys been taking advantage of that. And there's been a lot of guys who I've been working with that are kind of converting their sprayers over. They used the liquids last year, and that's something that we always talk about. They're very thick, takes that extra kind of couple steps as far as mixing goes. And they liked the results they had, but they wanted to see, how can we make this easier going forward? So I've been doing a lot of kind of over the phone, helping guys convert their sprayers over. And that's where most guys have those yellow nozzles. That's going to be a O2 nozzle. So we're changing that out from either a O2 to maybe like a O4 and doubling the nozzle size. So therefore you can get more water out, and you don't have to cover that plot, let's say maybe twice or 3 times. You'll be able to cover that once and saturate the ground a little better by doing that.
If I'm not mistaken, they come factory, with the yellow nozzles, right?
Yep. And correct.
And you're going to what, the red or the purple?
Yeah, and that's they changed the nozzle colors recently. So like I'm still trying to figure out exactly what brands are what colors, but that's something on the nozzle, it'll have some letters and numbers, and basically the last 2 numbers on that will be O2 or O1, O3, O4, anything like that. No, that's what you're looking for, is those last 2 numbers. Most of the time, the O4s are going to be red, but again, because they switched the colors up recently, I don't want to say red because sometimes that might mean it's an O5 or a different number. So getting a lot of feedback, because not only if they're running a O1 or O2, that's really a pretty fine mist. So when you're trying to spray even let's say Roundup out of that, if you have a really dense area you're spraying, that fine mist isn't going to get really good coverage in there. So you might get some stuff that died, but you might go back and there might be a ton of green left. And that's where they're kind of scratching their heads wondering what's going on. And a lot of the times that's just because that mist is so fine, you're not getting really good coverage even with your herbicide. So by going to a bigger nozzle, you're going to be able to penetrate that canopy a lot better and get a better kill with all your herbicides. And again, the more water, the better, regardless of what you're spraying. So if we do get guys to calibrate their sprayers at, 20 or 25 gallons or even more per acre, that's only going to help them with everything they're spraying. So we're doing that. We're switching nozzles out. They're getting better herbicide kills now. It's going to be easier to, put out all the Plot Doctor products. And a lot of the times there's sprayers that don't have agitation. So that's where I'm kind of walking the guys through and telling them, here's what we can do. Here's how we can add agitation to a sprayer that doesn't have it. And again, regardless of what you're spraying, that's only going to help keep everything in solution, especially when it comes to the Plot Doctor products.
Yeah. The other thing too about those yellow nozzles, the one with a fine mist, if you're spraying some Roundup on your plot to kill vegetation and it's alongside of a, let's say a switchgrass or a sorghum border, boy, if you got a mist like that and you've got any kind of a breeze or a drift, kind of run the chance of smoking that switchgrass border. And
absolutely.
if you got a heavier, bigger water droplets with a bigger nozzle, gravity's going to take over and eliminate some of that.
Yeah. And then you're not so worried about wind and drift either. It doesn't take much with them smaller nozzles in that mist, that if you got a slight breeze and you're spraying next to something that you don't want to kill, it's definitely nerve-wracking, and it doesn't take much to get that drift over there. So once you do get those bigger droplets, that makes a big difference, and especially in a scenario like that.
Yeah, and those nozzles are pretty easy to find. I mean, TSC carries them. I think Farm Fleets, I think they carry them, and they're really easy to change out. I mean, it's just a quarter turn, half a turn, pop them off and put the new one on,
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, depending on the situation, even if a guy wants to calibrate it and still use those, he still can. That's not going to waste or anything. So I still have guys that, they're going to still use the smaller ones with their herbicide, and that's fine. But then they just switch them out and use the Plot Doctor products with the bigger one, and that's fine too. So that's something to definitely think about and play with for guys that maybe didn't get a great herbicide kill. The guys that are spraying right next to switch or fruit trees, something like that. It's just something to think about and look into for sure.
Yeah. So before we wrap up here, I'm sure there's probably some guys that are wondering, man, I haven't got my food plot planted yet. And when's the latest I can plant food plots? And, I would say, northern tier states like northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin, you still got some time to put some seed in the ground, but like you said, now we're getting to that point where, the brassica window is done. And now we're pretty much relying on winter rye grain, maybe some oats, wheat, that type of thing. And, maybe some like red clover, but still plenty of time to get it done. I'd say probably in them areas, you're good up until about the middle of September. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like where I'm at, just because I got roughly 10 acres, I don't have anything done on, I'm going to be getting going after that really shortly here. And hopefully within the next week or week and a half, I'll be putting my first batch of rye on all those. I think there's still a lot of areas where even if you wanted to try to get some clover down, especially down south, you still got time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Not much time, but you still have some time. But other than that, yeah, like you say, definitely up north and kind of the northern areas, we're to the point where it's time to kind of be thinking about rye for any food plot failures, or like me, if you didn't have time to get your plots in and still want to have some sort of food there, that rye is going to be a good option. And you can still do your first application within the next week and a half. And that still gives you time to do one more layering 2 weeks after that.
Yep. Down here in Southwest Michigan, I still got a couple of ambush plots. I haven't even attempted to plant seed yet. I mean, it's all prepped. It's ready to go. It's dead, and I don't have any tall vegetation to plant into. So I'm going to have to get the seeds in a little bit. But right now I'm just waiting on the 10-day forecast, and would have been nice to plant yesterday, but didn't know for sure if it was going to rain or not, And
No.
it would have been great to plant yesterday because boy, we did get some hard rain. That would have been a great cultipacker to get that seed in that ground. But anyway, I'm just watching the weather, and as soon as we get, I'm probably going to wait till I see dark clouds on the horizon, right? Then I'm going to quick run out there and throw the seed down. So plenty of time yet.
Yeah, and that's, I think with the way the weather forecast has been this year, that's about all you can do because they don't have a very good track record going the last few months.
Yep. Yep, you bet. All right, Brad. Well, sounds good. Yeah, I'm excited for the season. I tell you, it's only, I don't know, 30, 40 days away. Coming fast. That's all I know. And it's almost too hot and humid to go out there and practice, my bow. But I'm looking for next week. Thinks the humidity and heat's supposed to simmer down a little bit.
It's definitely kind of hard to get too excited when you wake up and walk out of the house and you're sweating already, but it's definitely coming. Excited. I can't wait.
Yep. All right, Brad. Well, sounds good. We'll catch up again. And if you've got another side by side, anything that you want to do here yet this year, let me know and we'll get together and see if we can do a comparison.
No, for sure. And that's something, like I said, I'm for sure doing trials on the deer repellent and going to have that to showcase. And then I'm hoping I still got time to do a side by side with some rye, just again to kind of continue showing that and what we can do it. And especially with the weather being so iffy, that I think it's going to still, I'll have a good window to showcase that. So
yeah,
that's something we'll touch base here in a couple of weeks, kind of see where everything's at. And I'll let you know, but definitely plan on something like that. That'd be awesome.
Okay. All right, Brad. Well, hey, we'll check in with you again after Labor Day and we'll go from there.
That sounds good.
All right. See you, Brad.
So we'll see you.